Japan is a country that mesmerizes people with its rich culture and history. Beliefs, religious structures, attire, and legends passed down from generation to generation set this land apart from all others. Another fascinating aspect of Japan is the worldwide fame of its urban legends and ghost stories. From this country's geography, we've heard many chilling tales. Today, we're getting acquainted with one of them, Oiwa, who burns with the fire of vengeance. Rest assured, Oiwa, Japan's most famous ghost story, will send shivers down your spine with every line. Take your place, for darkness and gloom are ready to envelop you. Oiwa, also known by her other name, Yotsuya Kaiden, is one of Japan's 3 most famous ghost stories. The other 2 renowned ghost stories are Okiku and Atsuyu. Oiwa is also considered one of Japan's most chilling urban legends. Like many Japanese urban legends, it tells of a woman who returns for revenge. Therefore, Oiwa is an onryo. In Japanese, onryo means a vengeful spirit or a retaliatory ghost. Oiwa appears with her white funeral kimono, disheveled hair, and deformed face. She has only one goal: to exact revenge on her husband, who caused her the greatest pain in the mortal world. There are many variations and adaptations of Oiwa's story. Different versions have spread from Japan to the world, but when we delve into the essence of the tale, we encounter 2 main narratives. In this video, we will examine Oiwa's tragic and sorrowful story through these 2 fundamental narratives. We will find answers to all your questions about Yotsuya Kaiden, also known as the ghost of Yotsuya. In the first version of the story, Oiwa was a love-struck woman. She loved a samurai named Yemen, and the couple married after a while. However, this was not a happy marriage because Yemen was a wasteful man. She was also a thief. She stole money from her employer. The couple was experiencing financial problems. Eventually, Oiwa decided that this marriage wouldn't work. She left her husband and returned to her family's home. Yemen followed after the woman. However, Oiwa's father, Yatsuo Somen, stopped him. Somen knew that Yemen had been stealing. He demanded a divorce from Oiwa. Yemen drew his sword and killed Somen on the spot. He then went to Oiwa and lied, telling her that her father had been killed by a stranger on the road. He begged her to reconcile and promised to avenge her father. Oiwa, grieving the loss of her father, decided to continue the marriage. After a while, Oiwa became pregnant and gave birth to a son for Yemen. The couple had very little money. They were going through hard times. After giving birth, Oiwa fell ill. Yemen began to be disturbed by the situation. He had no money and was tired of dealing with Oiwa's illness. At that time, there was a wealthy doctor named Itachi living next to their house. The doctor had a beautiful granddaughter named Oim. Oim had liked Yemen from the moment she first saw him and later fell in love with him. She wanted to marry the samurai and share her desire with her grandfather. The doctor, loving his granddaughter dearly, wanted her to be happy. He planned a conspiracy for the girl to be able to marry Yemen. He wrote an ointment that he claimed would help Oiwa recover from her illness and asked her to apply it to her face. This ointment was actually a poison that horribly disfigured her face. Due to the ointment, the woman's condition worsened gradually. Seeing Oiwa's wounded face, Yemen began to feel disgust towards her. During this time, Dr. Itachi suggested to Yemen that he divorce Oiwa and marry his granddaughter instead. This would also mean becoming one of the heirs to a substantial fortune. Yemen was utterly repulsed by Oiwa. Oim, on the other hand, was young and attractive, so he agreed to the proposal. To cover the expenses of his upcoming wedding to Oim, Yemen began selling off all of Oiwa's belongings, including her kimonos. He didn't hesitate to sell even those belonging to his young son. Needing a legitimate reason to divorce his wife, he hired his friend Takeyatsu to assault Oiwa, thus being able to accuse her of infidelity. On a prearranged night, as Yemen left the house, Takeyatsu entered and approached Oiwa. However, upon seeing her face, which reeked terribly, he was overcome with pity and abandoned his orders. Takeyatsu confided Yemen's plan to Oiwa and then handed her a mirror. Until that moment, Oiwa had been unaware of the effects of the ointment she had been applying to her face. Horrified by her reflection, she attempted to conceal the wounds on her face by pulling her hair forward. However, when she touched her head, she realized that her hair was falling out in bloody clumps. The ointment given by the doctor had ravaged her entire body. Oiwa lost her sanity and succumbed to the agony she felt, losing control. She abruptly seized a nearby sword and plunged it into her own throat. As she lay on the ground in a pool of blood, she cursed Yemen's name repeatedly until she could no longer draw breath. Oiwa's body was discovered by Yemen's servant Kohai. When Kohai informed Yemen of the news, instead of grieving, he rejoiced. He began to suspect Yemen, but before he could take any action, he was killed by a samurai. Yemen then nailed the bodies of Kohai and Oiwa to a door and threw them into the river. He later spread the lie that they had been lovers secretly engaging in an affair. In the end, Yemen was free to marry Oim. It didn't take long for Oiwa's curse to take effect. On the wedding night with Oim, Yemen struggled to sleep. Turning in bed, he suddenly saw the horrifying and shapeless face of Oiwa's ghost right beside him. Yemen grabbed his sword and attacked the ghost, cutting it down. Just then, he realized it was an illusion. The person he had cut down was not Oiwa, but Oim. The new bride lay dead on the floor, covered in blood. Horrified, Yemen rushed to seek help from the doctor. However, upon reaching the doctor's house, he encountered the ghost of his servant Kohai, whom he had killed. Yemen once again attacked with his sword, only to realize he had killed the doctor. Filled with terror, Yemen fled into the night. But Oiwa's vengeful spirit pursued him. Wherever he went, Oiwa's ghost was there. Her shattered face haunted his dreams, her terrifying voice screamed for revenge. She even appeared in the lanterns that lit his way. Eventually, Yemen fled to the mountains and hid in an isolated hut. But Oiwa followed him there too. Tormented by the woman's ghost, Yemen became unable to distinguish reality from nightmare. He lived out his days in madness, cursed by the haunting until the end of his life. Additionally, this version mentions a man named Naosuk. Naosuk is in love with Osode, Oiwa's prostitute sister. However, Osode is married to the owner of the brothel where she works. Naosuk's feelings are strong, and he tells Osode he wants to be with her, but she rejects him. Later, Osode's husband accuses her of adultery with Naosuk while married, and she is sentenced to death. Naosuk finds a letter written by her before Osode dies. In the letter, Osode confessed that she was the long-lost sister of Naosuk, which was the reason she couldn't sleep with him. Overwhelmed by this shocking news, Naosuk succumbed to his shame and ended his life by suicide. The second version closely resembles the first but contains some differences. Oiwa and Yemen were two people deeply in love. Despite their financial struggles, they decided to get married. Shortly after, Oiwa became pregnant. In this version, the child had not yet been born. Oiwa was portrayed as pregnant throughout the events. Initially, everything went well, but financial problems began to strain their happiness. Yemen gradually became irritable and depressed. The unhappiness at home and financial difficulties led Yemen to develop hatred towards his wife and engage in a relationship with another woman. The woman's name was Oim, and she was wealthy. Despite being married and expecting a child, Yemen fell in love with Oim, and their affair lasted for months. When Oim's father learned of this forbidden love, he was furious, although his daughter was deeply attached to the man. One day, Oim's father told Yemen that it was shameful to have a relationship with his daughter while being married. He suggested that if Yemen wanted to continue his relationship with Oim, he should divorce his wife. He also mentioned that if Yemen married his daughter after divorcing, he would receive a share of his wealth. Yemen pondered over Oim's father's words for a while, forming a sinister plan in his mind. The only way he could be with Oim was to get rid of Oiwa and their unborn child. He decided that the best solution was to secretly poison his wife and make her death appear natural. Poor Oiwa was unaware of her husband's diabolical plans, eagerly awaiting the birth of her baby in joy. One evening, as Oiwa and Yemen sat at the table, the woman noticed that her husband was very tense. He hadn't touched his food. When she asked him why he wasn't eating, he became angry and told her to mind her own business and eat her own meal. He added that it was important for the baby to eat healthily. Oiwa finally gave in and ate her food. It didn't take long for her to feel sick. Yemen watched as the poison slowly took effect. He didn't help his wife, but Oiwa didn't die immediately. First, Her face became distorted due to the poison. Then she lost consciousness. Yemen was too cowardly to finish what he had started. He laid his wife's body on the bed. At that moment, Oiwa woke up from her coma. She didn't remember anything about the poisoning. However, the baby in her womb had died from the poison. Despite her horrific appearance, Oiwa survived. Yemen was desperate when his wife didn't die. He began to play the role of a concerned husband. Meanwhile, he continued to think of ways to get rid of her. One night, he took Oiwa for a walk. They came to the edge of a cliff. Yemen looked around. There was no one there. Then, with a sudden movement, he pushed his wife into the void. He retrieved Oiwa's shattered body from where she fell. Yemen spent all his money to give her the best funeral. He tried to appear as if he loved her very much. But he was secretly happy. He had gotten rid of his wife. And he would inherit both Oim and a great fortune. The night before the wedding, while lying in bed, Yemen saw the lantern in his room was lit. When he looked closely, he noticed that the flame was changing shape. He recognized Oiwa's distorted face within the flame, and it grew larger. Yemen, unable to comprehend what was happening, struck the lantern in horror with a stick, causing it to fall to the ground and shatter. Yemen thought he heard a woman's laughter coming from the depths. Later, he decided that what he experienced that day was related to drinking too much alcohol, and he fell asleep again. When Yemen woke up the next day, he had already forgotten what happened at night. He and On got married. When the man lifted the bride's veil, he was horrified. In front of him was the terrifying face of Oiwa. Yemen panicked, drew his sword, and severed the head from the body. The severed head rolled down the corridors of the church. When it stopped, he saw that the head belonged not to Oiwa, but to Oim. Yemen had killed his new wife. The laughter was heard again. Shocked, Yemen left the church and ran home. He locked everything and hid. At that moment, someone began to knock on the door of the house. It was Oim's father, asking the man to open the door. When Yemen opened the door, he encountered Oiwa. Once again, the man swung his sword and cut off the head. However, shortly after, he realized that this was also Oim's father. Yemen ran towards the cliff, with Oiwa following him. The man stood at the edge and looked down. Oiwa's vengeful spirit pushed the man down first for revenge, then she herself jumped into the void. Oiwa's story was based on some real events that occurred during the Edo period in the 17th century. It truly deserves to be one of the most terrifying and haunting ghost stories ever told in Japan.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe.